Here it is. So we are officially recording now. And so welcome to the second cohort call of Open Hardware Makers. Thank you all for joining us. We have together with Sissy, who's gonna talk about some of her projects, more about that later. Let me start by sharing my screen and sharing today's presentation.
I will paste the notes.
Thank you.
Here in the chat.
Yeah.
Remember that we use the notes collaboratively, right? So you can just leave any comments or questions you have directly there.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think Julio, you're gonna start, right? Let me just put this on presentation mode. Yeah. Okay.
So as Andrea said before, welcome everyone. We have, as usual, we are in week 3. This is staging your project module. This may be a little confusing if you are looking at the curriculum, but it's the module 2, staging your project, because we take 2 weeks to work on each module. So we continue working on the staging your project material. And we have a couple of announcements as usual before every call. This call is being recorded, except for the breakout rooms. You can turn off your camera during the main session if you don't want your face to be in YouTube, which is perfectly fine. We will upload the recording to our YouTube channel. You can find the recordings of previous calls in our YouTube channel. Of course, all interactions must respect Open Hardware Makers community guidelines. If you have any problems or you witness something that goes against the community guidelines, please send us a private message here or an email to openhardwaremakers@gmail.com. So, as usual, we start our call with the icebreaker exercise. So if you go to the notes, is the link that I just pasted there in the chat. And if you go to the introduce yourself section, that is the emoji with the handshake, as Andre is sharing there. Sorry, Andre, I think we switched to your browser again. Sorry for that.
Sorry.
So if you go to the introduce yourself section, you will find the icebreaker question that is quite easy. Just add your name, the name of your project, any social media handles if you feel like sharing that, and what you had for breakfast today, because we're curious about what you eat in different parts of the world where you are right now. I don't know if my name is there. I think it is. Yeah, Andre is also writing his. And while we do that, and then we'll take a look at different breakfasts around the world, we just to kind of locate where we are in the program. Sorry, Andre, I have something in the middle of the, yeah. We are here in week 3 of Open Hardware Makers. We are at a cohort call, as you may have guessed, and this is what we call a peer review call. So this is the second week of module 2. What we are going to do today is go over some of the assignments that you have for the module 2, and also some of the questions that may have come up as a result of your first mentor meeting last week. So next slide. Just a quick recap of the previous weeks. Sorry. During our first cohort call, the call that was 2 weeks ago, we introduced the Open Hardware Canvas. It is quite, when you see it at once, it's a lot of information, but the idea is that it serves as a quick glance of the building blocks that you need to build your open project. And we really, really advise you to have that canvas in the editable version that we provided at hand, and you keep changing it as long as you, continuously as you work on your project, because you will see that it will be refined. Information there will be refined and will become more useful. We also saw in week 1, there are multiple pathways for open hardware projects. You can go into producing a commercial product, you can make an educational project, you can make a hobby, keep it as a hobbyist endeavor, that's absolutely fine. And we also kind of reviewed what can Open do for you. It cannot provide you free labor, but it can, for example, get you closer to your users, and that is really good for your project. Another sorry, Andre, the next slide. previous week, we didn't have a cohort call, but you met your mentor. So this was your first mentorship meeting. It's quite an important milestone. You should have worked on your SMART goals, which is the goal that you have for your participation in this program with your mentor. And if you took a look at the curriculum, you probably saw that it gives you some orientation in terms of what are you doing with your project? Are you replicating an idea from someone else? Are you forking an idea because you detect an opportunity to adapt this, or are you contributing to a project? It also has a very specific activity, which we will talk about later, which is try to draft or set up like a very initial version of your front page, if it's a website or README or something that shows what your project is about to the world. So we arrived to today, this week. And as I was saying, this is the continuation of staging your project. These are the models that I just mentioned, right? And the different assignments that we will work on today. Next slide. So what are we going to do today? We are going to work on your vision statement, probably the most important assignment that you have during the module 2. We are going to discuss a little about what happened during your first mentor meeting, and did it meet your expectations? Did it not? What can be improved? And we are going to have Cecilia Herbert that is going to share with us some of the lessons learned from one of her projects that we really like. So moving on to what to do today. Andre, do you want to? You're muted.
Today, we're going to start with an exercise, which is about your vision statement, which you should have worked a little bit during the previous week. And as you've learned in the curriculum, a vision statement is a really short sentence that basically tells people right away who you're working with, what are you doing, and who the target audience is. So we're gonna split you into breakout rooms, and you're gonna have time to discuss how the exercise was, but mostly to share your vision statements and to get feedback from one another. If it's clear, if you can get right away what you mean, and so on and so on. We're prepared because on the way back, we're going to ask each one of you to share your vision statement with us. So this has to be clear, fast, and concise because there are many of us and not enough time. And so maybe also use the breakout room time to practice a little bit if you want. Okay?
And do you want to start putting people in breakout rooms?
Yeah, let me, sorry.
Yeah. And one important thing is that this is short on purpose. So you have practice about telling in 30 seconds what your project is about, who is engaging to achieve what. So discuss that in the breakout rooms, and we see you back here to share your vision statement.
Okay, just give me a second.
Yep.
There we go.
Okay, I think.
So you should have received an invitation.
Yeah, I see people joining now.
Yeah.
The notes, feel free to do that. Remember, the notes are here. But maybe we can start. What do you think, Andrea? We can start. Yeah. Who wants to start? We don't want to just select someone. Just if you want to start, just unmute yourself. Wow, people are scared. It's just share with us in 1 minute what your vision statement is about.
We can go first.
Cool. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, so our vision statement is that we're working with academic and industry partners to develop and build an easy-to-use digital microfluidics ecosystem that laboratories around the world can use as a basis to build next-generation biology and chemistry applications.
Is there any way you can paste that in the chat or in the notes? The notes would be better because it would be great to have it.
Yes, I can write it.
But that sounded really, really well to me.
Yeah.
let's try to put all of our vision statements in the notes so we can take a proper look at them. And let's move now to Elise. You are raising your hand. If you want to unmute yourself, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Julieta. My name is Jafsia Elise. My project is on designing a digital stethoscope. And my vision is working with my community, which is the Boa Lab, to design a digital stethoscope so that it can be used in remote areas or suburban areas where there is difficulty to have basic access to healthcare services. And also, and this is the main objective, is to reduce the distance between the healthcare practitioner and the patient, due to the fact that now with COVID-19, the virus is spread with a long exposure contact between the health practitioner and the patient. So what we want is to digitalize the stethoscope so as to reduce the long contact between the doctor and the patient.
Great. Thank you, Elise. I mean, this sounds all great, and I think it gives a lot of information, but as a vision statement, it needs to be a little bit shorter, right? Because it needs to be kind of like a 10-second. But that's absolutely fine. And I'm sorry, because we also need to move on to the next people. Well.
Also, Jausia, I tried to take notes of what you said in the Google Doc. If you go to the Google Doc, you can change it there if you want to, but we can discuss this later.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, who wants to go next? Huya, you have your hand raised? Or sorry. So Huya had her hand digitally raised.
Yeah, I can go if you want.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm working with Biomedical Technology Lab and the Platelet Society in Reading, UK. We are trying to develop a new portable and cheap assay to measure platelet function by combining the microfluidics and the platelet function test. So it can be used in hospitals, clinics, and blood labs to test coagulation and to examine anticoagulant drugs.
Thank you, Ria. Would you be able to add your statement to the notes, please, so we can go back to it?
Okay, yeah.
Thank you. I think we are pending Simon or Simon.
Yeah, and Nano.
All right.
Simon. Yeah.
We are bringing humans together to co-create an open and free design for a robust solar-powered water machine that can make drinking water from almost any dirty or salty water and can be built almost anywhere.
That sounds pretty exciting. Again, same as Ruya, if you can add it to the notes so we can review it later.
Yep.
Nano, I know your connection is really bad. I don't know if you want to write down in the notes directly your vision statement. And Andre, I don't know if you want to have some time to discuss this vision statement and maybe.
Yeah, so should we, I mean, who wants to say about the process of creating the visual statement? Like, what did it help at all? Like trying to condense everything, did it help you in any way to focus your mission, or how did you find it? Yeah.
I could add to that. I did it already with a great book from Jono Bacon, the community manager of Ubuntu. The book is called The Art of Community. And the chapter about that really made it clear how important it is to mention also what you put in the example, to, okay, whom, what, why, and to just put it together and also make it appetizing to invite people to, okay, to see an opportunity. That was a really exciting part when I did that.
Ah, cool. So could you also share, if you can, on the notes, the link to this so that people have like a reference of the book?
Yep.
Anybody else has any other thoughts about this?
For example, I see Cybots. It's really concrete, your statement. I really like it. I would like, for example, if you could make a comment about another statement, something that you like in another statement, or something that you can think someone in a productive way can improve.
Sorry, I just wanted to say about ours, it's a little bit cheating because I feel like we didn't start from scratch, but it's like iterations, right? Like I think a lot of these things get better the more you iterate on them.
Okay, but that is key, right? Because something about the statement is that you keep working on it and you refine it and you refine it all the time.
Just like hardware and software.
Just like hardware. So what did change? What did you change, for example? What did you refine?
I don't know, because I think we had something before, but I think Sheldon changed things too. So we're kind of.
Yeah, I think it came mainly from like discussing what the vision was and what we want to do, and like initially from just building the instrument to where we want to go with it, and yeah, it's not so much like just taking this statement and improving it as this is like a reflection of how maybe the vision has evolved over time.
Absolutely. And Jacques, yeah, for example, your case had something that happens to all of us all the time. We want to give as much information as we can about the project, right? So it's well understood. So what would be a good advice for trying to synthesize as much as possible? Does anyone have any advice?
And I feel like the template that's on the website does help. Like it provides a minimal like structure that if you really stick to it, you end up with like a one sentence that's self-explaining.
One long sentence.
One long sentence. You can omit commas.
Nice. Yeah, I think the questions that Simon was mentioning are also great. What am I doing? What for? With whom? That is a good guidance.
And I would add, if you want to make it more clear, you explain it to people and then you ask them to explain it back to you, so you understand what got stuck actually from what you said.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good tip, right? Like actually asking people to say it back to you, and then try to ask people who are in a completely different field or in a different like technical background and so on might be also really useful.
And I was thinking, because we are just a few, we can do the next exercise together in this room without going to breakout rooms.
Yep.
So we wanted to give you the chance to have a space to discuss how your mentor meeting went, and if it was useful for you, and remember we discussed expectations the last time. So how did it go, and if anything can be improved. Just feel free to open the mic and talk.
Sorry, before you start, do we want to stop the recording for this or?
Sure, yeah, that'll be better.
Okay.
Okay, so this is for YouTube. We were just discussing mentorship expectations and reality, and super great insights from everyone. And we are now going to move on to our invited speaker today. In fact, our star speaker, because she's the first one we invite to Open Hardware Makers and our cohort calls. And it's Dr. Cecilia Herbert. Ceci is a behavioral neuroscience. During her PhD, she studied neural coding of sound production in canaries using extracellular electrophysiology. And she has experience also with open hardware because she's been building research tools that are open during her PhD, and also started volunteering and developing open science initiatives, as she's passionate about teaching people new tools to help solve their problems and encouraging others to learn. She apparently is also a great oboe player, or that's what I heard. So Ceci, feel free to go ahead. I don't know if you want to present. Yes, there you are.
Okay.
There.
Yeah. So you can see just a blue slide, right? Cool.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for that introduction, Julieta. It's a pleasure. I would have loved to participate. I still have to have like a project of my own, and then I'll be here next time round. So I'm Cecilia Herbert. I'm a neuroscientist from Buenos Aires in Argentina, and I did my PhD here, as Julieta was mentioning, in experimental behavioral neuroscience, studying the brains of songbirds while they were singing. So there's a fair bit of hardware involved in that. I didn't develop any tools that I used in like sorry any like equipment, but yes, little pieces of tools that were like specific for my implementation and to interface with other tools. And I wanted to share with you how open practices I realized were at the core of my training, and how I started this journey to share those with other trainees. So these are the kind of hardware that I was working with. This we manufactured in-house, and this I did design from an open source design that was taught to me by a researcher. These are an interface between the animal's brain. So we use electrodes, which are these tiny things. Can you see my mouse? Yes, no? So these tiny wires are electrodes that go into the animal's brain. And so this is a device that is an interface between those electrodes and what is happening in the animal's brain with the amplification system and the computer setup that is going to be plugged into this connector here. No? So in these sockets is an amplifier that is going to take this signal from the bird's brain and into our recording systems. So it's not what I'm going to talk about today, but it's the overview and the kind of work that you might find graduate students doing in the lab. So this is the setup, as I was saying. This is the animal with the wires, and you pick it up with the computer. And I was mentioning, so these are the kind of things that we manufactured in-house, and they're super small, so 1 centimeter tall. And less than a gram in weight, because we want the animal to be carrying that on its head. And that interfaces with an amplifier board that was the part of the equipment that I didn't really go into, right? That was off the shelf. But there are companies that work in doing open source hardware for this kind of equipment and the software to do these neural recordings. So the story here is that I learned this from Mariano Velucio, a researcher who was kind enough to show me everything, like building this microdrive, which is what is called. It's this shuttle that helps you move the electrodes and penetrate the brain to record what's happening. And he loaned me the materials to get started and was super kind. There was a paper published and everything, but there wasn't a step-by-step guide or a bill of materials, right? They were doing this stuff in rodents, and I had to adapt it to make it ultra lightweight and adapt it for songbirds. And that's when I started writing that documentation, right? Being able to reproduce it made me have to write this documentation so I could teach more people in the lab. And as you can see, these were like super ad hoc stuff, like very, very specific things for a very niche application. And I felt being able to produce that tool as well as something like this thing I'm showing you here, which is a holder for the amplifier. Oops, sorry, excuse me. So this is just a drawing of another piece of equipment, again, very specific, very ad hoc, that is just holding this amplifier in a different configuration. And it was super enabling to be able to go from an idea to an actual object that I was using in the lab to help with my experiments, right? And the fact that I had those designs and that know-how, and that I was able to do it with a biologist background, right? So something that I hadn't learned during my undergraduate education. And this is how a lot of people start, at least in my field. And I was fortunate, as I told you, to have someone that spent time with me and showed me these tools. But then what about other students, right? Did they have someone? Did they even know that there was a 3D printer in the building that they could use to help them move forward with their experiments, right? And this got me thinking that the skills that we were learning, myself and other students during graduate school were very valuable to share. And even more so if they could be implemented in the open with free and open source tools. And we set up these workshops, talleres in Spanish, talleres open source. These workshops were held in Spanish to bring the community together. We started with the neuroscientific community because that was our background. And they were about practical tools and practices in the open to make open research the default status in Latin America. So that was our vision statement that we worked just as you were doing just now. And what this started with was, so I want to stress this was me and a group of colleagues, right? So, but we started with some introductory workshops. So referring back to my example, there was an exercise that I taught in FreeCAD to allow students to understand how they could go from that idea to that object. It's the same amplifier holder, so this piece of equipment, but how can you manipulate it in the lab? Sometimes you need these super simple parts. But they didn't have any electronics or interacting parts or more complicated stuff that you're probably designing now for your own projects, but it was still enough to get a grasp of the open development cycle. And we did this not only with hardware, but with, with software and other stuff. I'll show you that in a minute. This is about that open development cycle. Is okay, one of the students that took the course adapted what I taught them and did it for this is the same kind of container for the amplifier right here, but it's a watertight, and they are doing it instead of rodents or canaries, they do it in crabs. So of course, having this knowledge and having been able, it's something that could be seen as very, very simple, but this is an essential tool in this person's workflow now, again. So we really, like sharing and teaching these very small parts had a wider reach than I could have imagined. And really, you don't know where the designs could end up, right? They could be on top of crabs in a lab. So the project involved, as I was saying, not only hardware, but software. So there we have like Python, graphical analysis, or bioimaging, tracking animals, some motor stuff. And these are all the tutors that work with us. So it was people such as myself and other graduate students that, knowing a subject that they had to learn during their PhD, they opened up that knowledge and gave practical lessons on how to get started with that. So starting with the simple stuff, right? Or the introductory, because it might not be simple to anyone else, right? And these were virtual encounters and in Spanish. And we uploaded everything to YouTube, and that meant that we could be inclusive of people that couldn't come to those time slots. And we also took into account their interests by giving surveys and surveying what their needs were and how they were going to interact with our content and the content that our tutors could provide to us. We participated in the Open Life Science program, which, as you have heard, is very similar to the kind of stuff that you're doing here. And really, I have to say that working on our vision statement and adopting licenses and the code of conduct, it really made the project more welcoming and especially more transparent to people and how we were leveraging other people's work to provide our training, right? And it meant that our stuff started to be open by design instead of as an afterthought. So it's a vision that is clearer to potential collaborators, to students, and even to present ourselves more solidly with grant agencies. Basically to allow us to get more people on board with a similar mindset and goals to our own. In terms of these grants, what we received was a very generous funding from an international organization to allow us to embark on an ambitious 5-day-long training in which we were actually able to send hardware out to people across Latin America. And really, even though there's a whole ecosystem of tools in our domain that are open source and interoperable and give you control of every part of our experiment, usually at a lower cost. What is also something that people have not maybe yet been taught is that to broaden that concept of open source, not just to your tools, but to your practices and to these small iterations that you make, such as the little pieces of specific equipment that I was printing out and someone adapted to crafts, right? We were able to use open material because that had licensing that was open source. It was worked by specialists and pioneers in these open source tools, which we translated to Spanish and adapted to our needs. So I was also a big part of working in the open to be able to leverage on these things and adapt them. Students were really thrilled. I mean, we found that there was not necessarily a literacy in basic programming and electronic skills, even at that level for the kind of public that we had. And this was tremendously enabling, and they knew that they could share this with more people because it was open source. The training materials were open source. And to us, the organizing team working in the open also meant transparency and accountability. We talked about in the course who we chose and why, in terms of gender equality and different geographic distributions, and also had front of mind that we wanted to share this with more people, and now all of that material is online. So I think that at the core of building open is sharing, right? And I really wanted to stress that there is value in taking the time to document your project, even provide training to be able to engage with your community and understand them and better share your open source projects. And like each person that gets to your landing page or to your GitHub or to your talk for the first time is new to the project. So like that dance that you're dancing is new to them, even if the music can be familiar, and you kind of have to bring them in and invite them to dance and show them those steps to that dance so you can dance together, right? People come with different skill sets, different interests, even different languages, as was a main focus in our project. And I think it's useful to have like a starter pack of what you need to know to get started and where those expectations are. Just a brief anecdote, when in one of our courses, I have this here to remind me. So I'm showing the jumper wire, a bundle of jumper wires. And a student was having problems. Okay, they had to connect a basic circuit, and they had, okay, which wire do I have to use in the bundle? And all it took as an explanation was like, okay, like these are actually individual wires, and you can use one of them at a time. Like this is not a component. This is just what we gave you in the kit, but this is how they're bundled up together. You can choose just one. And that's all they needed to get started, right? All the rest of it wasn't a problem. It was just this thing that for someone with the bias of having done it already was very, very obvious and not a problem at all. So I would like invite you to think what is going to be the jumper wire bundle in your project, and what is one small thing that you can tell someone that can help them adopt your project. And I think there's nothing that's too small worth mentioning, within limits, of course, but in the sense of, you can also set your expectations and say, yeah, well, okay, people building my project will have to know how to use jumper wires, whatever. But where is that limit, and how can you anticipate those needs and be aware of them instead of just shoving the documentation online and hoping for the best, right? And I think that is sharing, and it's a vital part of a good open source initiative. So that was it for me.
Thank you, Ceci. That was great. That was, I think, exactly what we needed to discuss today at the very beginning. Does anyone have questions or comments for Cecilia?
I would go ahead. I found the last part especially interesting, because I think this is what you could also call opportunities, right? Because people connect for different opportunities. Like you go together to the bakery, the one just wants to smoke, the other one wants to get bread, the other one just wants... So like, okay, but we're all going to the bakery. So this is, if you look at it, not everybody is passionate for the same reason. Not everybody is passionate for bringing drinking water to people who can't afford it. Some people just want to have fun. Also, that was a key part of Linux success, what I read now. It's like, okay, we're having fun, and it's totally all right. So yeah, it's really important, and I like the image with the different wires. I'll keep that one. How to kickstart, bring the spark.
Sheldon, I think you're muted.
Yeah, just a question. What would you say was a good first step for you to start really sharing your documentation and engaging with people, like bringing them in, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I think it was having these events of gathering people together, and because they were at the training, like events with different topics, and we took some time to show them the platform, which was on GitHub. But GitHub is sometimes intimidating to a lot of people. So part of it is also like having a workshop on what GitHub is and how you can move around your documentation. And then again, it doesn't have to be a special event. You can maybe record a video and have it there, like at the beginning. This is what our project is about, and where the things are and how these things interact together, like a little map. And for us, it was a translation of the material as well, because it's something that is alienating sometimes when you have to learn a new subject and also learn like in a different language, even though most scientists use English, of course. This was like an extra step to bring them closer. And we had a website as well, like to have a different format. I can actually show that, right? To have a different format from YouTube. This was made with the Hugo templates. I hope you're seeing it now, the workshops, and it's deployed from GitHub, and it's very simple. Actually, doesn't look amazing, right? But so we have what the project is, and this same kind of vision statement that I was telling you about, and then like links to the platform. So if you want to see the videos, they're on YouTube. If you want to see the materials, they're on GitHub. The people, of course, that we're working with, and then for the GitHub, and this was through working with the Open Life Science program, right? Of course, very front of mind here. README, what this is and where you can find stuff on YouTube, Discord server, conduct code, and the licensing. And I think with that, it's a very first. I think this is missing. Okay, how you can contribute? We're still working on that, right? So it should also have a statement of if you are taking people contributions and how to do that. That's what. Yeah.
This is good because as part of the module 2 that we are seeing today and we saw last week, we suggest you to start. Some of you already have like a website, but we suggest you to start turning this vision into this introduction to the world. I think, Ceci, if you allow me the interpretation, I think for me the most relevant thing I got from your presentation is how well you know the users of your project, and you brought them by developing this workshops. You kind of had an idea because they are students working on similar things, but maybe not. So they have like the minimum necessary information to take on from there, but you know who you're talking to, and I think that's super important.
Yeah, we also purposefully surveyed them. So we asked them, do you know open source tools? Do you work in open source tools? Are you interested in open source tools? And then which ones? And also always tied to a particular example in mind. So such and such software for tracking in neuroscience. So a very, very specific set of problems. Maybe they don't know the tool, but they know the problem that they have. So maybe that's an approach you can take as well. Like, what is my tool solving? And maybe I can tell people more about that problem, and then it will become obvious how you need that tool to solve that problem. Yeah.
And another thing is that the website is very simple, but it takes you, it tells you what you need, right? I don't know if it happens to you, to the rest of you, but when you go into a website and you're trying to understand what this is about and what you can do with the project, and it's so crowded with information that you don't know what to do, it's very frustrating, right? So even as the simplest website with actions for the user to visit YouTube or download the documentation, I think that's great. Are there any other comments or questions for Cecilia?
Thank you so much for that talk. It was great. I really especially loved this when you were talking about dancing and music and like the, yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and watch that part again because I felt like it was really, I like the way you put that.
Yeah, thanks. I kind of think metaphorically, because when I was getting started, it was something I came to realize that it was thanks to other people that were inviting me in. And the other thing that we like to think of is getting into the water, right, in the sea. So it might be very, very cold. And then you kind of tiptoe in and it's like, oh, this is what that was. It's not that scary anymore, right? And you kind of need someone out there swimming and saying, hey, come on. And here's the life, the circular thing that floats you. Here's a floating thing, come on, and you know, bring you into these deep, dark waters. But you start by tiptoeing in, right? So yeah.
That's great. Any other comments or questions? You can also leave those in the notes if you feel like doing that.
Generally, I would be interested, how's the open source hardware community in Argentina? Yeah.
Yeah. There's people that know much more about this than I do, but it's not super developed. Julieta has made a thesis about lots of projects. There are instances like Nano was here a few minutes ago. They're working on stuff. There's a network, the ReGOSH network, which is part of the GOSH Global Open Science Hardware Community. There's a local chapter, and yeah, there's people working in Mendoza connected to that work network. There's people in Buenos Aires connected to that work network. And then, of course, I think there's all of these maybe separate pieces of know-how and tools that each lab has, or I mean, like, I'm in the science part, right? But labs or other kind of like hobbyists or people that build this at home. And I think that's where we have to like extract, like no pieces of knowledge is too small to be able to be shared, and that's a story. It doesn't need to be the big institutions and the big projects, but we can start with the little things. And we're trying to, like, in my domain, there's not a lot. Many students were coming to us with very little experience in programming and electronics, and these were the kind of basic things to develop an open source project. So that's why we were developing the training aspect of it. Yeah.
Being aware of time, but I think we have time for one more question if anyone wants to ask anything. Okay. Then I think we can thank Ceci for her presentation. I think it was really insightful because you achieved such an impact with your project, and it was a project just like any of your projects that are here in the call. And there is a lot of that glue work that you did on top of the technology that I feel is so important. Andrea, should we move on to which are the next steps, and then we just close the meeting? So as I repeated like 1,000 times today, we are in week 3, and next week you're going to meet your mentor. There is no cohort call next week. We see each other back on April 20th. We, as usual, will send you our Monday email with all the outline for next week. And you can also contact us in the GOSH forum or via email. Remember to document your mentor meetings in the GOSH forum as much as you can, because that will give you this history of your project that will allow you to learn from your process. And if you want to stay after this call finishes to discuss, for example, like Simon, you were discussing at the very beginning, or to talk about anything else, we are going to stay here for a couple of minutes also. Okay.
I guess, yeah, as Julieta said, questions or comments, we can stay here a little bit longer. And if that's not the case, we'll say bye-bye for those who wants to leave.
Yes, and I think we can stop the recording now, right?
Yeah.